Thank you, Will and Sandy. Our first speaker today is making a return to the Power Breakfast stage. Shane Fernando spoke at a most intriguing breakfast 11 years ago. There are two significant facts to note upon his return. First, he annoyingly doesn't seem to age like the rest of us. And second, this is a bit of a theater revival. When he came on stage in 2014, Shane shared with us the plans for what became the Wilson Center. Today, he's back to share plans for the future of Thalian Hall. Please join me in welcoming Shane back to the stage.
Thank you, Rob, for the kind introduction, and thank you to the Greater Wilmington Business Journal for the invitation today. It is truly an honor to be back. Well, this morning I'm going to take you on a little time machine. So we're going to go back to the year 1806. And in 1806, Wilmington had its first theater built. This was called the Innes Academy, and it actually sat on the exact site that Thalian Hall sits today. And it was given by Colonel James Ennis to the people of North Carolina, right, his estate, to found the first free school. And on the second floor is the school, and on the first floor is a theater. And its revenue from the theater funded the operations of the school. So for decades, this building served our community up until around the 1850s. But two things: it was not very well maintained throughout its lifetime, and when it was built, it was already a little bit out of date. So we get to a gentleman called P.T. Barnum, and he brought in Jenny Lind to the United States. You saw her in Great Britain and arranged her American tour. Now, if you saw The Greatest Showman, she was the beautiful blonde songstress who toured the country. Well, her train stopped in Wilmington, about in this very place we're having breakfast. And the city mobbed the train station, begging for a command performance. And apparently, P.T. Barnum came out of the train and asked, "How many does your theater hold?" He already knew the answer. And he told them that, well, my orchestra would fill the greater part of your theater. And with that, he turned on his heel and went back into the train. And that was a gut punch to the largest and most prosperous city in the state, one of the most important cities in the American South. And for lack of a better term, they had the Taylor Swift of the 1850s here in Wilmington, and they were rejected. So as the story goes, the Innes Academy was leveled, and plans were made to build the largest performing arts center in the American South, and one that technologically could hold its own against any other theater in the nation at the time. The city brought in the greatest theater architect in the nation in the mid-19th century, and that was John Montague Trimble of New York. He had designed over 40 theaters in Manhattan and around the country. And what is also important is this is the only one of his theaters that still exists today. On the other side of the building, he designed our city hall. So we had our city council chambers, our city offices, the city library, the armory. And this made a very powerful statement from the people of this community, placing its civic life and its cultural life on the same hill in the same building. And today, Thalian Hall continues to shine as a beacon for our region. She is now one of the oldest continually operating venues in America, also one of the busiest, most utilized historic venues in the nation, with over 700 events last year and over 100,000 guests who have attended events. We have over 40, thank you. We have over 40 resident organizations from our community who call Thalian Hall home. And they represent dance, theater, film, visual arts, education, and so on. So she is a workhorse, but a very beautiful workhorse. And why does she endure? Because Innes Academy had a very different fate, and thousands of other historic theaters across our nation have met the wrecking ball. But Thalian Hall has endured. And I think there's a major reason is the community has always lifted her from one generation to the next. And I'll trace this back to a gentleman named John T. Ford. So after the Lincoln assassination in the 1860s, his theater was shut down. And he came and he took over the lease for Thalian Hall. And when Thalian Hall was about 12 years old, he oversaw her first documented major renovation, installing heating, investments in stage technology and other decorative elements, and installing a central gasolier in the middle of the theater. And this started a trend, generation after generation. You see, every 10 to 15 years through the history of the building, the community lifting the building to the next generation. This continued to the 1880s, and in the 1890s, Thomas Edison brought his projectoscope to Wilmington for the first public film screening in the state of North Carolina. The building didn't even have electricity yet, but the city temporarily put a power plant in and wired it up, and it was so popular, screenings were added and added and added, that the next year electricity was installed permanently, and thus began the city's love affair with film. Renovations continued through the 20th century. Here we have a WPA photo during the Great Depression of restoration on the inside of the theater. In the 40s and 50s and 60s, the building adapted again. And we have UNC Wilmington finding the roots of its theater department at Thalian Hall. Before there was a Keenan Auditorium or Keenan Hall, students worked there as their classroom and as their stage for their work. And here we have students restoring decorative painting in the historic lobby. The 1980s brought the most major renovation to date to the hall, with the expansion of its lobby, backstage spaces, the Stein Theater addition, and other amenities. And then in the early 2000s, our most recent renovation saw further investment in stage technology, in guest comfort, in other amenities for the building. And now here we are today in 2025, and we have the city consolidating their operations in the Skyline Center, and this opportunity could not come at a better time for the hall. We have been out of time and space. Our current residents want to expand their offerings. We have organizations who want to come and make Thalian Hall their home, but there's no room at the inn. And so this transformation that we're proposing has three major prongs. One is facility, second is entrepreneurship, and the third is education. Part of the facility will be the addition of 3 new venues to the complex. We have an outdoor amphitheater, a listening room, and then we have in the current former council chambers the construction of a new venue called the Hippodrome. And the addition of these new venues will allow us to double our capacity. We're projected to go from 100,000 to 200,000 guests annually. So the Hippodrome is quite interesting. Some people know this, but originally in the 1850s, this room was a theater. There were 2 theaters in the building. And you can see here in this photo, this is from the 1920s, in the library, there's the stage, and there's stacks and racks on the stage. And this room served as a performance space for about 50 years. And then in the 1890s, during the roller skating craze, it became a roller skating rink. And then in 1906, it became the city library, which was bursting at the seams on the first floor, and the city moved it up to this room for more space. And it continued to serve our community for about 50 years in that room. And then it was cut up into smaller office cubicles in the 1950s. And then in 1990, we have the current council chambers configuration. And thus will be the new Hippodrome space, which will be an immersive theater. And what is that? So what we're looking at here is think the Sphere, but on a much more intimate experience. So what we're looking at, so with a theater company, say they want to perform in the Gobi Desert. Well, at the press of a button, the floor turns to sand, and you have a 360-degree horizon around you of the desert, or wherever you want to go. So this will be incredible applications for dance, theater, music, for competitive gaming, for live sporting events, and so on. It will be a space like no other in the American South. And what I love about this is you'll be in one of the most contemporary performance spaces in the region, and then you take 15 paces and you'll be in one of the most historic rooms in the country for performance. It's quite a beautiful marriage, but it continues Thalian Hall's legacy, her legacy of always being an adaptable and premier space for our region. The ground floor will feature what is called our Institute for Entrepreneurship and Education, and these will house a variety of studios, laboratories, recording studio, and library, and then off the back will be a scenic lab, which will be our hub for our workforce development program. And we'll be working with the North Carolina Film Partnership to conduct continuing education and training for crew members, for film and live events technicians. We will also be developing an entrepreneurship program for artists, being able to give them toolkits to treat their work like small businesses. We have, for instance, a lot of musicians. We have a burgeoning music scene here with bands being created, a lot of musicians working in bars and restaurants, and the leap from that level to the stage is quite a tall step. So how do we get them that toolkit so they can begin to understand contracts, understand touring logistics, be able to write a technical writer, how to run a payroll, how to pay themselves? And the goal is then to connect them to our touring consortiums in the region and across the state so we could send out our musicians from New Hanover County across the state, across the American South, and they could still call Wilmington home and make a living doing what they love. Another piece will be our incubation center, where we'll be able to support the development of new work, new theater, new dance, new music. And for instance, a new play from the first draft to when the curtain goes up is on average 7 years of development. So we find a lot of organizations here, we have 2 playwrights organizations here, where they'll get to a certain part of the development and then they'll stop because there's no more infrastructure here regionally to support that. So we find artists going to New York, going to larger markets to complete that work. And while I love New York, I don't know if I like New York's name on our artists' work. I want to be able to keep our artists here to develop their work here in Wilmington. And this work has already started. Actually, a colleague reached out this past summer to us from New York and said, I was reading about the transformation, I was reading about the incubation center, and there's a project we want to see if you're interested in. Would you be willing to co-produce this new work with us? And so I said, well, there are two things, and it was a 2-person show. I said, one of the actors can be from New York, but the other has to be hired here locally. And the entire creative and technical crew has to be hired here from our region as well. And they agreed, and this summer we did the technical residency and premiered the show at Thalian Hall. And now it is in the booking process, and for the next 2 years, will be sent out across the nation on a national tour. And this will be the first national tour that has been launched from Thalian Hall. So it's a very, very special time for us. Next is our education piece. So we have our Pied Piper Theater program. This is our flagship education program. 77 years old, started after World War II to engage students in the live performing arts. And every year, for decades, we have brought every first and second grader in New Hanover County to Thalian Hall for a free field trip where we produce a show for them. And we've, for a number of years, been having around 5,000 students. And 2 years ago, we set a goal to get to 10,000 students by 2029. So we began engaging 5th grade students and incorporating them in the performance, their chorus classes, where they perform now peer-to-peer. And last year we had school buses from Pender County pulling up to the building for the first time. This year we'll be having every first and second grader from Duplin County coming to Wilmington to Thalian Hall for performances. So last year we surpassed 6,000. This year we're projected to surpass 7,000. So we're well on our way to reach our 10,000 goal for those students. Another new program which we're piloting now with New Hanover County Schools, a new partnership, is called the Pied Piper Institute, where the hall will become a site for continuing education for New Hanover County school teachers. And we'll be working with them on developing curriculums to provide this continuing education for them free of charge. So there's a lot to come. This is just a little sneak peek of what we have planned for the hall and its transformation and getting her ready for her next 167 years. We began fundraising this year. Construction begins in mid-2026 with a completion date in 2028. And we will not be shutting down our operations. This is for our commitment to our community, but also our commitment to the dozens of organizations that call Thalian Hall home, and their financial health depends on us being open. So we will not be shutting down. Also, the project is projected to cost $25 million. And I also want to give a very special thank you to the endowment for their investment in Thalian Hall, as well as the community challenge that they put out to help leverage funds for the project. Thank you, thank you, thank you for that. It is truly a transformative time for our beloved Thalian Hall and for the community that we love. Thank you.